Take you back now to one of our top stories as we're looking at the official handing over of the mortal remains of some of the, struggle fighters, especially as we heard then from President Cyril Ramaphosa was talking about this homecoming, ceremony being so important for the families as well as, some of the political parties, for example, who would have then been waiting to have their freedom fighters come back home and really know where their graves are. And we were trying to have a conversation earlier on with Advocate Sipho Mantula. Hopefully we get to establish a better line with him, but I do understand that Mkhulu Nsingiza, a great Empire and Kemet co-founder, is joining us now for this conversation. Good afternoon to you and thank you so much for your time. Mkhulu, let's just start with, talking about the rituals, because a number of people are watching today and not understanding the significance of, some of the rituals that would have been performed today and why that needed to be done so importantly.
The rituals, I'm sure, because they were performed where the bodies were. Meaning that, when it comes to South Africa, it's just, the final, funeral rites. But as an example, if somebody, died outside in exile, the family has got to go there. Ngesintu ngesizulu kumele alandwe ngalo muntu lo umlahlankosi mphafa, where you are now carrying the spirit, of the deceased as well as the body. So that is the main ritual, which is very important that should happen. So by the time they are received here, in South Africa, that ritual of umpafa, as well as, the same thing as umbulahlankosi, has got to continue from the airport until to the resting, place where they would lay the victims, body to rest.
So I've got two questions then in light of that. Let's start with, so that is why it was important for the families to then travel with the officials to the actual places where they were being laid to rest. Now, when they are exhuming those particular remains at that time. So this family would then have, their own rituals that they're performing at the time. Are they also making sure that they're speaking to whoever their relative is there and maybe tell them that they're coming back home with their spirit?
Oh, that is important, and of course, that's the main important ritual. As they are, removing the body, there's got to be some communication, a ritual that is done, to that, deceased person. So informing them that now they are living exile. Remember, most of them were in exile. Informing them that they are now living exile. They are being carried and transported, back home. It's all about communication. Even the person that is carrying umpafa, umlahlankosi, has got to communicate with the body until it is laid to rest. When they pass the oceans, that person reports only communicates to the spirit, and nobody else until, they lay that person to rest.
So does the family, appoint one person to do this, or is it different people doing it at different places?
No, it's one person, because it's the person that the family trusts. And it has to be a member of the family, because it can't be any other member. It has to be the member of the family that communicates and tell the spirit that now we are entering the plane, and explain each and everything. When they cross the ocean, please don't remain behind. Come with us, until the last point. That communication, that person is not supposed to communicate with anybody, but except with the spirit, of the deceased.
And Mkhulu, if you can just stay with us on the line, I do understand Advocate Sipho Mantula is now joining us for this conversation. Advocate Mantula, I hope we're able to hear each other better now. We were talking about the fact that, yes, we've seen, moments like these in our country before. For example, you think about Moses Kotane, JB Marks. Yeah. Let's talk about the significance of this moment 30 years on.
The policy of 2021 that has allowed this process. But if you look at the TRC documents of 2010, there were regulations that were allowing this symbolic ceremonial exhumation of the freedom fighters. Again, it is a delay from the state that 30 years later, and like Mkhulu asked when I was listening earlier, when I was coming in, the cultural significance in the protocol is being captured. The family consultation is being captured, and one assumed that this morning, early in the morning, they were able to do those rituals. But what is key, Bongiwe, it is that for us to memorialize these activities, it is difficult when you look at the countries that many freedom fighters have been killed. The question of reparation. I spoke earlier when I was cutting, I said you can talk of repatriation, restitution, but what about the repairing of the damage that the families had to go through? Because they were killed, most of them, that have been brought back. And second, when you look at the selective narrative, the memory of capturing all the liberation movement is how our history in this country must be captured. We can't be having a one single narrative. We need to capture the narrative. Hence, people like John Nyati Pokela, Edwin Makoti coming from Orlando West, and Soweto, like I've said earlier. When I met the families today, I could see a sense of pride, a sense of maybe not a closure, but beginning of the journey to can reconcile with their loved ones.
And that journey there, how complete can it be then, as you mentioned, this process of reparation, if that particular process is still outstanding?
No, that process was bottlenecked, even if today we've honored the former President Thabo Mbeki, that he might have started this process, but it starts with Tatu Mandela, 194. Remember the act I was speaking about, the Act on Reconciliation and National Unity. There were regulations that covered this aspect. And when I look at the money that we're giving to families to rebury now, Bongiwe, in 2024, compared to that regulation from the then Minister Dula Omar, the late, it is less now, Bongiwe. You can't use 15,000 or 17,000 to can rebury, according to that TRC Act. The policy that came from government is silent also. And even the minister today was so defensive, saying that we should not equate the amount of the years. We cannot, equate the amount of the struggle of freedom fighters who fought for this country. But we need to know what is the price of freedom that they had to pay for. And that's where it is significant, both politically, culturally, and spiritually, this return or the homecoming of the freedom fighters. And the wording also, that we use the word mortal remains. They are the African spirit, they are the African bones of freedom fighters. Very important. And the exhumation laws that we are using of 1925 and 1980, it says a lot about the apartheid laws that are still even haunting us when we have to do even our own rituals.
So, Mkhulu, if this process is here and we're listening to Advocate Mantula with, some of the families that are talking about, according to him, some of these questions that they have, what does it mean then for the sanctity of the process if there are still so many questions in some of the families?
There's a lot of questions. A lot of people, some of them, didn't get the joy of receiving, the remains of their loved ones. There isn't, an open thing, it worries us as Black people because when it came to the apartheid government, what I know, the type of work and ceremonies and remuneration, that they took care of their soldiers. When a soldier fell in another country, they made sure that the family, is well taken care of. And they will commit all resources to make sure that they ease the pain. But we find that things are different when it comes to Black people. Like, Advocate says, It's been, over 30 years. Why? There's no reason, because these are things that should have been given priority in 1994. Not to wait this long. And there's a law that agrees and supports all this repatriation. But, we didn't see, which is what concerns us. It's like the life of black people, are not worth, all that. And we witness a completely different stance when it comes to, white people. They take care of themselves, and make sure that the families that remain with the pain, at least they are consoled, at a certain point. But with us, families have been begging the government for over years to do this work, something that should have been a priority immediately, after 94.
So, Advocate Mantula, what does it mean then for the process going forward? Because when you speak to, those, for example, in government, and you also speak to some within the ANC, they tell you that it's going to take possibly 5 years or even just a little more than that in order for them to wrap up this particular process, because they're saying that they're looking at least over 1,000 mortal remains spread across the world.
Is waiting from NPA missing testing today, Madeleine. And she said to me, for them, the numbers of the bodies are many. I said to him, can you give me the number? And let's look at the TRC file. What was the TRC mandate for you? And the issue was also around the budgeting and the funding and the intergovernmental that we should appraise maybe for Nabondi. We might be critical on the state, but we need to appraise the intergovernmental from your home affairs, defense. But when you look at the numbers, from Angola, Tanzania, Uganda, and many other countries, the challenge it is still around the mapping, the forensics that we don't have in this country. The skill comes from Argentina, and the numbers, like I said to you, it will still be a long game. I don't think 5 years is fair, because if they took more than 29 years or 25 years, can we still even trust them on the next coming 5 years of this GNU? One will say that let's give it another time, but it will take another 20 years or 30 years. That's how we should know that most of them, as Mkhulu said, the TRC files spoke about the missing people who have passed or who have disappeared. People like Mbuiso, nobody knows where Mbuiso happened to Mbuiso. There are people like TSC Machine, now he was killed in exile. People like the daughter of Miriam Makeba, Bongi, it's in Jimmy Conakry. So as we were talking about what against Bongi, let's move away from political activists also. Let's look at even also cultural activists who died in exile. How do we bring back their bodies and the cultural artifacts? I think the Heritage Month, it can talk about the human remains, but we also forget about the heritage artifacts that has been stolen from this country.
And, we just end off this conversation here, but I do hope we circle back to it again and really talk about this important moment, and certainly one that, is not only reserved for Heritage Month, but should be an ongoing conversation. Let me thank you both for your time. That was Mkhulu Nsingiza, Great Empire of Kemet co-founder, and Advocate Sipho Mantula, researcher from the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs at UNISA.